Well, hello there. This is Jeff back with another screencast focusing on some final issues you might want to think about as you're revising Project 1, moving from the rough draft that was due by now a couple weeks ago to the final draft that's due this coming Monday. So in this screencast, we're going to look at the issue of genre itself and how well in your essay you might be identifying two different levels of genre, right? The first one would be the larger question of the internet meme as a genre in and of itself, right? That there's kind of certain characteristics that apply to all internet memes, or at least to all of the kind of category of internet memes that we've been discussing, by which I mean the kind of static picture-based internet memes, versus the kind of subgenre within that category, the smaller category within that original group that you focus on in particular. So, examples of those would be some of the ones we talked about in the last few weeks would be Socially Awkward Penguin, 60 Spider-Man, and pretty much every single one that each of you focused on in your rough draft. So, I think everybody's doing a really great job of talking about that subgenre, right? At least the rough drafts that I've looked at and the people I've talked to about their drafts. But maybe what needs to be strengthened in a lot of these drafts is the question of the internet meme as this larger genre, right? Like, what are the characteristics that are common to all of those? And that would include then all these smaller subgenres that you've been focusing on in your own individual essay. So Stephanie's been kind enough to volunteer to let me use her rough draft as an example of kind of working through this issue and seeing how it appears at different levels of an essay. So let's move on over to the schedule page. And if you haven't seen it yet, you'll see a link here all the way at the bottom, identifying genres successfully. So what I did here is I pasted Stephanie's rough draft from a couple weeks ago on the Howard Wolowitz meme, which is kind of a fun one to talk about if you haven't seen it. This was a new one to me. I must admit, I think of myself as a student of the internet meme, and having my finger on the pulse of the wrist of the internet meme. The internet as a body, and its wrist is something I'm touching to get its pulse of memes. I think you understand what I'm trying to get at here. But I was not familiar with this one based on the character from the popular sitcom The Big Bang Theory. So if you haven't seen it, it might be fun for you to see it as well. But what we're going to focus on here is what parts of the essay in its draft form here refer to the internet meme as a genre in a large sense, and which one to the subgenre of the Howard Wolowitz meme in particular. And I think looking at those differences might be useful for you in thinking about how it appears in your own draft. So again, I just pasted the original onto this page, and then you can see here, under this title, I tried to identify two different levels of genre identification. Everything in red here is what I take to be referring to internet memes in general, again as a large genre. Then everything in green that I highlighted has to do with the Howard Wolowitz meme as a subgenre within that larger group. So let's take a quick look. Here in red, we have, kind of a definition of what memes are, and then we have a reference to, maybe some people debate whether memes are humorous or offensive, and I could see how you might think of that, at least the humor part in particular, as kind of a characteristic of memes in general. But then everything in green here, we have more specific details about the characteristics of the Howard Wolowitz meme as a subgenre of that larger sense. Now, I think the green stuff here, again, which is the stuff about this subgenre meme, is really strong. One thing that Stephanie did really well here that maybe you want to think about for your own essay if you feel like you haven't been clear enough in identifying those characteristics, you just broke it down into three different levels, right? So you can see you have maybe the first one here, you have transitional language like the next characteristic, and then also here's this other thing, and then it mentions that you must have all three of these components to be classified within the subgenre. So that's kind of a standard definition strategy. If you're trying to define something, you try to tell someone, well, what are the things that have to be there for it to count as that thing? And here Stephanie did a great job of doing that around the Howard Wolowitz meme. But where maybe we could add some material is around the larger question or the more general question of internet memes as a genre that would include, amongst other memes, the Howard Wolowitz meme. So the stuff here in red is not bad, but maybe it doesn't get close enough to doing the same kind of thing that was done with the subgenre of telling us, well, what are common characteristics or things we expect to see in memes in general, and then how does the Howard Wolowitz meme do those things, but also do some other things. So if you take a look, what I did here, if you scroll on down to the third section, revise the intro paragraph to introduce memes as genres and as subgenres, right? So I struck the first sentence here, and why did I do that? It's not a bad sentence, and it's kind of an interesting one. There's nothing wrong with it, but I thought the draft currently begins with something about what a meme is. Then it moves to pretty effective introduction technique here, which is putting the reader in the perspective of the writer. So, like, has this ever happened to you? And that's a great technique in general for introductions because it compels the reader, encourages the reader to think about things from your perspective and have kind of a point of commonality between you as the writer and they as the reader. And then it jumps back to the question of the Howard Wolowitz meme, which is this other stuff down here. So that's the original. So what I did here is I kept these second and third sentence and I added this kind of language, which does some of the work that Stephanie currently does in the second and third paragraph, by which I mean the background material telling us that who Howard Wolowitz is, what television show he's from, and so forth, but also making the transition from this anecdotal or hypothetical situation to the questions of memes, going from one thing to the other rather than going from memes to anecdote back to memes. Now it just goes from anecdote to memes. So if you take a look here, kind of continue this, well, maybe we all have our favorite examples of absurd pickup lines. That continues the idea of thinking about pickup lines. And then here's the transition. Well, you probably haven't heard many like the ones featured in the Howard Wolowitz series of memes based on this character. And then here, I put in a little language that already kind of mentions that there's a two-part set-up punchline sequence that's common to both pickup lines and to memes in general, right? But that these memes are here distinguished by their use of scientific jargon and the ways as well as they emphasize rather than obscure the inherent nerdiness of their presumed speakers. So all I'm doing there is bringing in some of the language that Stephanie uses later on to talk about the subgenre of it, and then I added this kind of transition here, and this would be setting up, kind of letting the reader know that one of the things that's going to happen in this essay is talking about genres around memes. So we have this line, this series of memes is a great example of how formal the rules of genres of internet memes can be, even for those that are made purely for laughs. And purely for laughs is something Stephanie had in the original there. So that just kind of, gives us a bit of a setup that kind of smooths the introduction, so it moves again from that anecdote to the question of the meme or description of the meme itself, and then a final sentence that brings up the idea of genre, and both that the Howard Wolowitz meme has its formal rules, and that these rules fit in with internet memes in general. But what's really going to play the role of identifying, in a fairly concise, it's not going to be really long, fashion is maybe a couple new sentences in a second paragraph here. And again, I use this as, there's a lot of ways you could do this, but I'm trying to think here of a method that a lot of us could apply to our own execution of this assignment and see how it might fit in there. So my suggestion here is maybe you end the first paragraph with a line that talks about your subgenre as one that is interesting or useful in identifying how genres themselves work at different levels in a meme. So that gets it kind of out in the open so the reader expects to see it. And then maybe use your second paragraph or your third paragraph somewhere early on to talk about the general genre rules or genre characteristics of internet memes, again, in general, before you move on to the subgenre stuff. So here's what I did with this one here. So I use language like this. Like most static picture-based internet memes, the Howard Wolowitz memes, here's a characteristic. Features a recurringly reused picture. It has text superimposed on top and bottom, right? So those are characteristics of memes in general that are also apparent in this kind of subgenre of memes. Then again, similarly, like most memes, here's another thing that happens, right? And here I was trying to kind of play on the idea that maybe we have three genres actually going on here. We have the genre of the Howard Wolowitz meme, we have the genre of internet memes in general, and then we have maybe the genre of the pickup line, right? Which strikes me kind of based on Stephanie's example and her reference to the Crest White line that apparently she was subjected to at some point, is that that's kind of how pickup lines work in general. So memes are kind of follow a pickup line structure in a lot of ways. There's kind of a setup and then a punchline. They're quick, they're short, sometimes they're crude like a lot of internet memes are. But anyway, I thought that was interesting, so I mentioned, just as an aside, that that's common both to the pickup lines and to the subgenre. But then I added this, right? So however, because this particular meme is based on the Howard Wolowitz character, right, it also possesses many distinct subgenre characteristics specific to the more memorable, and that should be memorable, sorry, instead of memorably. I'll fix that later, and it'll be in the screencast, but it won't be on the page. Attributes of that character, right? So here is where the distinction is introduced between a subgenre of a meme and the larger genre. So many distinct subgenre characteristics as opposed to those more general characteristics. And then, again, I encourage you to read the way Stephanie does this in a rough draft. It's done really well. You then have those subgenre characteristics identified in kind of a paragraph devoted to each of the three different characteristics that are focused on in this essay. And then another paragraph that kind of talks about how the meme that she created fits those three characteristics very well. So again, if you're worried that you don't talk about the internet meme as a larger genre and only about the subgenre, kind of the smaller category of meme that you just decide to zero in on for this project, then maybe you don't have to add a huge amount of material. Maybe you can just add a couple of sentences in the first and second paragraph that does that work by saying, here are common features of the meme I'm focusing on that are common to all memes, and then here's the ones that are different, and then spend most of your time on the ones that are different, right? So I hope this example is helpful for you. If it's not, let me know. And again, as you're working on revising your paper, feel free to call me, to text me, shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you have a request for a screencast, I know we only have a few days before the final draft, but if you would like to see a screencast on another issue, again, just contact me and let me know, and I'll see if I can take care of that for you.